Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today, we are continuing in Life with Father by Clarence Day. This story is entitled Father and His Pet Rug. Father liked spending his summers in the country, once he had got used to it, but it introduced two major earthquakes each year into his life. One when he moved out of town in the spring, and one in the fall when he moved back. If there was one thing Father hated, it was packing. It seemed a huddled, irregular affair to a man with his orderly mind. For a week or more before it was time to begin, he was upset by the prospect. He had only a few drawers full of clothes to empty into a trunk, but it had to be done in a certain particular way. No one else could attend to it for him. No one else could do the thing properly. All that Mother could do was to have his trunk brought to his room. When it had been laid in a corner, gaping at him, his groaning began. He walked around, first putting his shirts in, then his clothes and underwear, then burrowing under and taking some out again to go in the suitcase, then deciding that after all he would not take part in what he had packed. During all such perplexities, he communed with himself, not in silence. The first sounds that used to come from his room were low groans of self-pity. Later on, as the task he was struggling with became more and more complicated, he could be heard stamping about and denouncing his garments. If we looked in his door, we would see him in the middle of the room with a bathrobe, which had already been packed twice in the suitcase and once in the trunk, and which was now being put back in the trunk again because the suitcase was crowded. Later, it would once more go back in the suitcase so as to be where he could get at it. His face was red and angry, and he was earnestly saying, "Damnation!" Long before any of this began, Mother had already started her end of it. Father packed his own clothes. She packed everything else, except that she had someone to help her, of course, with the heavy things. In the fall, for instance, a man named Jerome sometimes went up to the country to do this. He was a taciturn, preoccupied colored man, an expert at moving, who worked so well and quickly that he kept getting ahead of his schedule. It was distracting to Mother to plan out enough things to keep Jerome busy. It was also distracting to see him sit idle. He was paid by the day. But the principal problem that Mother had to attend to was Father. He said that he didn't really mind moving, but he did object to the fuss. As to rugs, for instance, he refused to have any at all put away until after he and all his belongings had been moved from the house. This seemed unreasonable to me. I said he ought to allow them to make a beginning and put a few away, surely. He would admit privately that this was true, perhaps, but here was the trouble. If he once let Mother get started, she would go much too far. "When your mother is closing up a house," he said, "she gets too absorbed in it. She is apt to forget my comfort entirely, and also her own. I have only found by experience that if I yield an inch in this matter, the place is all torn up." He added that he had to insist upon absolute order, simply because the alternative was absolute chaos. Furthermore, why shouldn't the process be orderly if it were skillfully handled? If it wasn't, it was no fault of his, and he declined to be made to suffer for it. Mother's side of it that it was impossible to move out imperceptibly. "Things naturally get upset a little, Claire dear, when you're making a change. If they get upset too much, I can't help it, and I do wish you would stop bothering me." One result of this difference was a war about the rug every fall. 2 or 3 weeks before they left, Mother always had the large rug in the hall taken up. There was need of 2 rugs in the hall, she told Father. "I won't have it, damn it, if you're making the place a barracks," he said. "But we're moving," Mother expostulated. "We must get the house closed." "Close it properly, then. Do things suitably without this cursed helter-skelter." He retreated into the library where he could sit by a fire, while Mother went in and out of the cold rooms and halls with her shawl on. The library had 2 large heavy pieces of furniture in it, a grand piano, and a huge desk-like table piled with papers and books. This table filled the center of the room and stood square on a rug. It was hard work to lift that heavy table to get the rug out from under it. Until this was done every year, Mother kept thinking about it at night. Strictly speaking, it wasn't necessary to have that rug put away much beforehand, but she wanted to get it over and done with so that she could sleep. But Father was particularly dependent on this rug because he liked to sit in the library. He was always determined that it shouldn't be touched till he left. He couldn't, however, remain on guard continuously. He sometimes had to go out. In fact, he was maneuvered into going out, though this he never quite learned. In the late afternoon, when he supposed the day's activity over, he would come out of the library and venture to go off in the motor. Not far, just to get the evening paper, which was a very short trip. His mind was quiet. He assumed that nothing much could be done in his absence. But just as he was leaving, he would be given some errand to do, some provisions to buy in the next town beyond, or a book to leave at the friend's. Or, if this might make him suspicious, nothing would be said as he left, but the chauffeur would be given instructions what to say when he had brought Father's paper. "There are some flowers in the car, sir, that Mrs. Day—" Father looked up from his paper and looked threateningly over his glasses. "What's all this?" he said. "What?" The chauffeur repeated mildly. "That Mrs. Day wishes left at the church." "Damn the church," Father answered, going back to the market reports. Not that he was down on that institution, he believed in it firmly, but he expected the church to behave itself and not interfere with his drives. However, he was looking through his paper and he didn't say no, and the chauffeur didn't give time anyhow, but cranked up the car, and they went off down the post road, all the way to Rye. When they got home, Father hung up his overcoat in the cold hall, and grasping his evening paper, he marched back to the library fire. Meantime, things had been happening. Mother had the big table lifted and got up the rug, and Jerome had lugged it out to the laundry yard to beat it. After that, his orders were to roll it and wrap it and put it away. While he was doing this, which was naturally expected to take him some time, Mother thankfully went up to the china room to pick certain cups. She always felt a little more peaceful when Jerome was fully occupied. A little later, when she was in her own room, and had just sat down for a minute for the first time that day, and was sorting the linen and humming, there was a knock at the door. Mother sat up sharply, every bit of her alert again. "Who is that?" She heard a deprecating little cough, then Jerome's quiet voice. "An hour, Mrs. Day?" "Well, what is it, Jerome?" Mother wailed. She had thought she had left that man enough to do for once anyhow, but here he was back on her hands again. "What is it now?" she said in despair. "Have you finished that work?" "No," Jerome said reassuringly. "I ain't finished that yet." He paused and coughed again, conscious that he was bringing poor news. "Mr. Day, he's hollerin' considerable down in the library." "What about? What's the matter with him?" Jerome knew she knew well enough. He said, "Yes'm," mechanically, and added in a worried way as if to himself, "He's a hollerin' for that rug." Mother didn't like Jerome to use that word, hollerin'. It wasn't respectful, but it was so painfully descriptive that she couldn't think what other word he could substitute. She put down the linen. I never could see why she didn't stay quietly in her room at such moments and let Father keep up his holler until he cooled off, but I was an outsider in these wars, and Mother, of course, was a combatant. She charged out into the big upper hall and at once began an attack, launching her counteroffensive vigorously over the banisters. She called loudly upon Father to stop right away and be still, and she told him how wicked it was of him to make trouble for her when she was working so hard. Father, from his post in the library, boomed a violent reply. It was like an artillery bombardment. Neither side could see the other, but they fired great guns with great vigor, and it all seemed earnest. Jerome stood respectfully waiting, wondering how it would come out. He was wholly in the dark as to which side was winning. There was so much give and take, but the combatants knew. Mother presently saw she was beaten. There was some note she detected in Father's voice deeper than bluster, or some wariness in herself that betrayed her. At any rate, she gave in. She turned to Jerome. He saw that she was thinking how she could fix it. Jerome felt dejected. Had that big old rug got to be toted back into the library? "Jerome, I'll have to give Mr. Day one of those rugs from the blue room. One of the long, narrow white fur pair. You know which I mean." "Yes'm," Jerome said with a partial relief. "Put it under that desk?" "No, between the desk and the fireplace, by Mr. Day's chair. That's all that's necessary. He just wants something under his feet." This wasn't at all Father's idea of what he wanted, as Jerome soon discovered, when he took the long white fur rug down to him. Father was so completely amazed he forgot to be angry. He had supposed he had won that bombardment. He had made Mother cease firing. Yet now, after he had lowered his temperature again back to normal, and settled down to enjoy the fruits of his victory, namely his own big square rug, here was Jerome bringing him instead a long, narrow, hairy monstrosity. "What's that?" he demanded. Jerome limply exhibited the monstrosity, feeling hopeless inside like a pessimistic salesman with no confidence in his own goods. "What are you bringing that thing in here for?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Day. Mrs. Day says put it under your feet." Father started to turn loose his batteries all over again, but his guns had gone cold. He felt plenty of disgust and exasperation, but not quite enough fury. He fired what he had at Jerome, who stood up to it silently, and he kicked the offending white fur rug and said he wouldn't have it. But something in the air now seemed to tell him in his turn he had lost. Even Jerome felt this and put the rug under his feet, temporary, leaving Father trying to read his paper again, indignant and bitter. He particularly disliked this white rug. He remembered it now from last year. Mother went back to the linen. The house became quiet. The only sounds were thuds in the laundry yard where Jerome was at work, beating and sweeping his booty, concealed by the hedge. By the library fire, Father was turning over the page of his paper and glaring at the white rug and saying to himself loudly, "I hate it." He kicked at the intruder. "Damn woolly thing! I want my own rug." Father and the French Court. Except in his very latest years, when he began to get shaky, Father wasn't bored in his old age like some men. He kept up billiards, enjoying the hard shots until his eye grew less true, and he always found it absorbing to try to beat himself at solitaire. He enjoyed his drives until automobiles came and ruined the roads with their crowding. He enjoyed having a go at the morning paper in a thoroughly combative spirit. Every time the president said or did anything which got on the front page, Father either commended him, in surprise, for having some backbone for once, or else said he was an infernal scoundrel and ought to be kicked out of office. "And I'd like to go down there and kick him out myself," he added fiercely. This was especially the case with President Wilson's 2 terms. There was something about Woodrow Wilson that made Father boil. His dentist had made a bridge for him at this time to replace a lost tooth in front. Father soon took it back. "What's wrong, Mr. Day?" Dr. Wyatt said. "Is the occlusion imperfect?" "Why, your thing won't stay in. That's what's wrong with it," Father replied. Dr. Wyatt was puzzled. "You mean that the denture seems to work loose when you are at table?" "No," Father said. "It stays when I eat, and it usually stays when I talk. But when I read my paper in the morning and say what I think of that man Wilson, your thing pops right out." So life wasn't boring in his old age to Father. He read more books then, too, in particular books about past and current political clashes. In these he always took sides. When his side won, he wanted their victory to be decisive, but if the other side won, they needed hope to inflict a decisive defeat. The harder they pressed Father, the angrier and more determined he got. The more bloodthirsty, I was about to say, but he was always that, win or lose. This made reading an active and exciting way of spending his time. He didn't care much for detective stories. The people in them were flashy. He no more wished to read about rascals than he did about saints. When he read fiction, he went back to Dickens or Dumas or Thackeray. In his 40s, he often bought paper-bound books on the train, W. Clark Russell's Sea Tales or novels by a new man, R.L. Stevenson, which were then coming out. Some cost 50 cents, some 25, and he always liked books about horses, provided they weren't sentimental. But problem novels, especially Mr. Humphrey Ward's, seemed to him bosh. Also any books with triangles in them, or men like that fellow Hamlet. Father preferred to read about people who knew their own minds. He liked English history, but chiefly of the days before Cromwell. From about 1630 on, it was American colonial times that he turned to, as though some ancestral self in him was retracing its steps. One day, Mother was persuaded by a beautifully dressed woman book agent to buy in installment a set of Memoirs of the French Court. She never read them. She hated the hard, cynical tone of that period and those wicked women who robbed the poor queens of their silly old husbands, and she wailed with remorse and despair when each installment fell due. A package of 2 volumes at $10 apiece was delivered each month. "Oh dear," she would cry as she hunted through her bureau drawers and her purse to get $20 together without using the Altar Society's money, which could never even be touched, it was so sacred, and yet was always sitting there staring at her. "Those dreadful French creatures, they come so often, I just can't stand it. I did hope there wouldn't be any of this month. Why, if they are going to keep on coming like this, I don't know what I shall do." She had been ashamed to tell Father about them. She hid the books from him. But when paying $20 a month became too harassing, as it very soon did, she burst in on him one day and said she had been buying him a present which she hoped he'd appreciate, and she dumped all she had of the French Court on his library table. Father was startled. He put on his glasses suspiciously and said, "What the devil's all this?" "Oh, Claire," Mother said, impatiently pushing him, "don't be so stupid. It's the French Court, I tell you. It's a present for you." "I don't want it," said Father. "Yes, you do too," Mother shrieked. "You haven't even looked at it. It cost me enough, I can tell you. It's a very nice present." She hurried back upstairs before he could refuse it again, leaving him wondering what she was up to. The following month he found out. 2 more volumes arrived, and she told him there was $20 to pay on them. Father promptly exploded. "But the messenger's waiting in the hall," Mother cried. "He can go and wait in hell," Father shouted. "I hope he sizzles there too." "Oh, Claire, he can hear you," Mother begged him. "Please, Claire, do behave." And after the battle was over, Father was out $20. "I thought you said those books were a present," he said to her later. "But not all of them, Claire," Mother said reproachfully, as though he was being too greedy. "The ones that I gave you were a present. But of course you must pay for the others." Father bitterly warned her never to do such a fool thing again, and set to work to try to get his money's worth out of the French court. He toiled through its oily intrigues as long as he could stand it, but he had to give up in disgust. He put away the kings, queens, and courtesans in an orderly row with a yawn. They were nothing but a damned pack of foreigners. His ancestral self wasn't there. One point I've left out is that each volume had the owner's monogram on it. This had made the set seem quite deluxe when the agent hypnotized Mother. But even then, Mother had been doubtful about the French court. She hadn't felt sure they were nice, though she had hoped for the best, and she thought it would be safer not to have her own monogram on them. So she had the agent use Father's. This afterward seemed to prove she really had meant them to be a gift from the start. Father didn't believe it for a moment, yet there was the evidence. "I can't make Vinny out," I heard him mutter, staring hard at the monogram. They had been married for almost 50 years. Father plans to get out. One evening when Father and Mother and I were in the library talking, a trained nurse came in to take Mother's blood pressure, as the doctor had ordered. This was a new thing in Mother's life. It alarmed her. She turned, as she always did when she was in any trouble, to Father. "Claire," she said urgently to him, "you must have yours taken too." Father scowled at the nurse. Blood pressure was something which he had been hearing about more than he liked. He had just passed his 70th birthday. Many of his old friends had died, and when he and a few other survivors met at the funerals that came often now, Father had seen some of them shaking their heads and whispering things about blood pressure. What angered Father about it was that it seemed able to kill healthy men whom he had felt sure would last for the next 20 years, like himself. He'd talk at the club with one of them in the evening after a few games of billiards, and the next week he'd pick up a paper and see that the man had died. Father said he wouldn't mind if people died only once in a while as they used to. He said we all had to die, he supposed. But he didn't know what the matter was nowadays. Somebody died every month. And it never was a wizened old walnut like John Elderkin. It was always some sound, healthy man. No excuse for it. When he asked his friends at the club to explain it, he never got a clear answer. All they could talk of down there was blood pressure. He said he was beginning to hate all these funerals. They were getting to be disturbing and unpleasant things to attend. He told General Anderson he didn't see why they kept going to them. General Anderson frowned and said they had to. "If you don't go to other men's funerals," he told Father stiffly, "they won't go to yours." But Father said he didn't intend to die at all if he could help it, so they couldn't go to his anyway. "When somebody dies, the people who love them want to say goodbye," Mother said. "That's what I feel when I go to a funeral. You didn't used to mind going, Claire." "Well, Vinny," Father replied, "that was when I was younger. But what bothers me now is those parsons. Every time I go to a funeral, they get out one of their books and read the part that says that the years of man are 70. I know that I'm 70, but I'm as well as I ever was, hang it. I'm tired of hearing so much about this 70 business." The trained nurse stood there waiting. Father glared at her blood pressure apparatus and told her to take it away. "I don't know what it's all about," he said, "and I don't want to either. I won't have anything to do with this blood pressure." "Everybody has blood pressure, Mr. Day," the nurse said. "A lot of them have," Father replied, "but I haven't. I won't." "If yours is all right," the nurse explained, "this little indicator will show it." Mother said, "Please, Claire, let her take it, while the thing's right here in the house, and we don't have to pay a doctor to do it. It's costing enough for Miss Bassett. Let's get our money's worth somehow." "Oh, well, pshaw," said Father. "If it will gratify your whim, go ahead." Miss Bassett adjusted the strap on his arm. He sat there, red-faced and confident. She looked at the indicator. It recorded no special blood pressure. Father laughed. But Miss Bassett, examining the indicator again, saw that it hadn't worked. And when she readjusted it, the pressure was abnormally high. "Who? What of it?" said Father. "I'll poppycock." "No, Mr. Day, really," she said. "That condition is dangerous." Father's face slightly stiffened. He stopped joking, rose with unwilling concern, walked away, grew quite angry, and said in a self-controlled tone that he didn't believe a word of it. "You ought to take aconite, Mr. Day," the nurse told him. "Ha! Never!" said Father. His need seemed to be to forget it, put it out of his mind. I took some of the stable accounts out of my pocket that I had been attending to for him. He usually hated to bother going over them with me. "May I ask you about these, Father?" I said. He thankfully sat down at the desk and examined each item, and when we had finished, he seemed to have sponged off his slate. His arteries were beginning to get in poor shape at that time. There were lots of things about his machinery that wouldn't have suited the doctors. I thought of how he hated to go to a dentist or oculist. I thought of how much food his digestion constantly had to put up with, but he seemed to make his machinery serve by expecting much of it. Perhaps that kept him hearty. He at least gave it no doubts to deal with, no doubts of itself. Mother's habitual attitude was exactly the opposite. She read books on how to take care of herself. She tried different health foods, and the ominous warnings of advertisers frightened her dreadfully. But she came of a long-lived family, good hearty stock, and Father did too, and both of them lived to a ripe and far from languid old age. Mother used to go to the cemetery in Woodlawn with her arms full of flowers and lay the pretty things by some headstone as a sign of remembrance. After a while, she bought a cast-iron chair and left it out there, inside the square family plot, so that when it took her a long time to arrange her flowers, she could sit down and rest. This was a convenience, but unluckily it was also a worry, because absent-minded visitors to neighboring graves began to borrow that chair. They dragged it off across the grass to sit and grieve in, and forgot to return it. Mother then had to hunt around for it and drag it back, which made her feel cross, and thus spoiled the mood she had come out in. She didn't like this a bit. One Sunday, when she herself was past 70, and when father, in spite of his blood pressure and everything else, was nearly 80, she asked him if he wouldn't like to drive out with her to Woodlawn. She hadn't any flowers to take, but she had happened to think of that chair, though she didn't say so to father. She merely said that it was a beautiful day and that it would do him good to go out. Father refused, positively. He winked robustly at me and said to Mother, "I'll be going there soon enough, damn it." Mother said he ought to come because one of the headstones had settled, and she wanted him to tell her whether he didn't think it needed attention. Father asked whose headstone it was, and when Mother told him, he said, "I don't care how much it's settled. I don't want to be buried with any of that infernal crowd anyhow." Mother, of course, knew how he felt about some of the family, but she said he wouldn't mind such things when it was all over. Father said yes, he would. He became so incensed, thinking of it, that he declared that he was going to buy a new plot in the cemetery, a plot all for himself. "And I'll buy one on a corner," he added triumphantly, "where I can get out." Mother looked at him, startled but admiring, and whispered to me, "I almost believe he could do it." This is the end of Life with Father by Clarence Day. Thank you for listening.